Do you have Viking or Anglo-Saxon DNA, and how can you tell the difference? Now, as a quick overview, the Anglo-Saxon migrations were movements of Germanic peoples into Britain, namely the Angles, the Saxons and the Jutes, mainly between the mid-5th and 7th centuries AD. The Viking Age began a little later, in the late 8th century, when seafaring groups from Scandinavia raided, traded and settled across large parts of Europe and beyond, even into Newfoundland and Canada. Now, one of the main challenges when looking at the DNA of the Anglo-Saxons versus the Vikings is something called the Danish overlap problem. This is because it can be difficult to separate the DNA of Anglo-Saxons versus Vikings who came from the land we call Denmark today, as well as some general overlap in Northern Europe. Even so, there are still clues that can help, and in this video we'll go through 3 main clues as to Viking versus Anglo-Saxon DNA. Now, clue 1 is geography and surnames. Location in particular is very important, as the influence of these two peoples was not uniform across the lands they influenced. If we look at Britain and Ireland for instance, Anglo-Saxon influence was greatest in the east and the southeast of England, particularly in regions such as East Anglia, Kent and Sussex. This is where tracing your family tree can help a lot. England in general shows a east to west gradient, with Germanic or Anglo-Saxon ancestry generally higher in the east as a broad rule. Viking influence was more concentrated in the Danelaw of northern and eastern England, such as Yorkshire, Lincolnshire and parts of the East Midlands. It is also elevated along key maritime zones, such as the Irish Sea, the Hebrides, and especially the Northern Isles of Orkney and Shetland. The southeast of Scotland, on the other hand, shows elevated Anglo-Saxon ancestry. So having an idea of where your ancestors lived can give you a lot of clues, with surnames and middle names also helping a lot, again giving you hints to your true ancestry. Now, clue 2 is an important one: Y DNA haplogroups and SNPs, as it traces the direct paternal line from father to son. Because the Y chromosome changes only through small occasional mutations, known as single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs, it can give you a glimpse into your family's deeper ancestry. Now, one of the cleanest Viking and Scandinavian markers is R1A-Z284. This is very common in Sweden and Norway still today, as you can see, as well as places like Orkney and Shetland and Scotland. During the Viking Age, we know it was very common amongst Norwegian Vikings, medium amongst Swedish Vikings, and less so amongst Danes, as this table shows. And this pattern is similar today, as it is much less common in Denmark than in northern Scandinavia. This marker therefore largely avoids the issue of the Danish overlap problem, a core problem with separating Anglo-Saxon versus Viking DNA. The main question in relation to this marker, however, is timing. If you or one of your ancestors carries this marker, or a subclad of this marker, it obviously could have been introduced into your family line before or after the Viking Age. Yet for the purposes of this video, R1A-Z284 is much more of a Norse signal than an Anglo-Saxon one, and this is actually one of the cleanest separation signals between the two groups. The picture is much more complicated, however, for 2 other main haplogroups in these groups, R1b, U106 and I1. So how can we separate these haplogroups? Now, quickly before we look at this, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Manta Sleep. Now, these videos take a lot of time and energy to make, that's why getting a good night's sleep is essential, and that's where Manta Sleep comes in. Manta Sleep specialise in making premium quality sleep masks and accessories, including the Manta Pro, Manta Sound, and one of my favourites, the Manta Silk Mask. All their masks are engineered to be 100% blackout and comfortable around your eyes. They also have other great products, such as the Manta White Noise Machine, which plays 15 soothing soundscapes, from brown noise to relaxing ocean waves. Please click the top link in the video description below and use code HISTORY to get 10% off your order. Thanks to Manta Sleep for sponsoring this video, and now on with the rest of the video. Now, although R1b-U106 is more associated with Germanic ancestry and I1 a clear Scandinavian signal or a famous Scandinavian signal, there was crossover, especially in southern Scandinavia around Denmark. This was especially the case when it came to Danish Vikings, given their proximity to Germany. So how can we separate Saxon versus Viking signals when it comes to these two markers? Well, if we start with R1b-U106, the subclad RL48 is of paramount importance. This branch peaks in frequency in Frisia, the northern Netherlands, and North Holland, territories historically associated with the Saxon and Frisian tribes who settled in eastern and southern England. While some RL48 lineages certainly arrived with Danish Vikings, the sheer scale of the Anglo-Saxon migration, where continental Northern European ancestry rose to as much as 76% in regions like East Anglia, suggests that the majority of L48 in Britain is Anglo-Saxon in origin. If you look at the regional breakdown of this marker, you can see how common it is in England today still, and in people with English ancestry across the world. So if you or one of your ancestors belongs to a branch of RL48, this increases the probability of an Anglo-Saxon input. This is not to say that other branches of U106 aren't Anglo-Saxon, but this is at least one way to narrow it down to some degree at least. Now if we turn to haplogroup I1, two key branches are important. I1Z58 is considered more of a West Germanic Saxon branch of I1. This subclad is the primary I1 lineage found in England, particularly in central and southern regions. Although it is still very common in Scandinavia, as I1 is a key Scandinavian branch of course, it is also found at high frequencies in the Netherlands and northern Germany, and was carried by 5th century Anglo-Saxon migrants. So if you or one of your ancestors carries this marker or a downstream clad, it at least increases the probability of an Anglo-Saxon input, aside from any other obvious reason, like a recent ancestor from these places. I1L22, on the other hand, is much more of a Northern Viking and broader Nordic branch. It is more strictly associated with the northern populations of Norway and Sweden, and it is even high in Nordic peoples like Finns as well. It is much less common in the UK and places like the Netherlands than I1Z58. So although R1b-U106 is more connected to Germanic ancestry or Anglo-Saxon ancestry, and I1 a very core Scandinavian haplogroup and very common amongst the Vikings, there was crossover. But these subclans of these broader haplogroups does give you clues to your true ancestry. There is much less overlap when it comes to R1aZ284, making it a much cleaner representation of Scandinavian ancestry, and thus it gives you more clues as to Viking versus Anglo-Saxon ancestry. Now the third clue is autosomal DNA, the DNA inherited from all your ancestors. Although this cannot directly tell you whether one of your ancestors was an Anglo-Saxon or a Viking, it can again offer clues. A pull towards the Netherlands or northern Germany may fit better with Anglo-Saxon type ancestry for instance, while a stronger Scandinavian pull may fit better with Viking ancestry. But because these groups were closely related and later mixed repeatedly, autosomal DNA usually gives broad hints rather than firm answers. So if your results show a Scandinavian percentage, that can be suggestive, especially if it matches your family history and geography, but is not final proof of Viking ancestry, something I noted in a previous video. The same goes for a pull towards the Low Countries or northern Germany, but again it's more a clue rather than confirmation in and of itself. Now as a point of interest as well, there was subtle differences in the genetics of the Anglo-Saxons versus the Vikings. Although both groups came from the same broad North Sea continuum, there was subtle differences, and the Vikings in general were a little more genetically diverse than the Anglo-Saxons. Research suggests that southern Scandinavia experienced additional gene flow prior to the Viking Age, of ancestry from parts of Central and Continental Europe, and this was amplified during the Viking Age. A 2020 paper published in Nature, for instance, found that some individuals from Denmark and southwest Sweden during the Viking Age had large amounts of South European ancestry. This ancestry was absent from Iron Age Scandinavians in the study. So this is at least something to keep in mind. Now overall, the best approach is to combine all clues. Geography, surnames, Y-DNA haplogroups, autosomal DNA and other factors can help build a much clearer picture of your deeper ancestry. And when several of these point in the same direction, the signal becomes much stronger. And let me know your thoughts in the comments below. But why didn't the Roman Empire change Britain's DNA in a meaningful way? Well, to find out, please click here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe and hit the bell, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please also check out Manta Sleep, the top link in the video description below. But yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.